From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson with you. And ahead today, K-State's Ignacio Ciampitti will lend his latest observations on the condition of the Kansas corn crop. Ignacio also goes over a simple method of estimating corn stand yields at this point of the growing season. Then Washburn University's Roger McEowen will look at a result of huge court awards to plaintiffs that's generally overlooked the tax liability associated with those awards. He uses the example of a recent highly publicized jury decision in a glyphosate exposure case to show who really benefits from those enormous monetary awards. And later, with Stop, Look, and Listen, K-State's Gus Vanderhoeven. Plus more right here on Agriculture Today.
While many people know hunger is an issue in developing countries, it is also a problem in our own backyards. In 2010, 1 in 7 Kansans struggled to put adequate food on the table. 2 K-State research and extension programs are tackling this problem. The Family Nutrition Program and Expanded Food and Nutrition Education Program reach thousands of Kansans in more than 70 counties. They learn how to eat healthy with a low budget. For more information about these programs, visit ksre.ksu.edu.
You're listening to Agriculture Today here on the K-State Radio Network. As always, glad to have you aboard. As you might anticipate, the corn stands in Kansas are variable around the state, and we'll talk about that also. We'll get into a simple method of estimating corn yield potential at this stage of the growing season, which may also vary given how irregular stands are out there right now. We've invited by, once again, crop production and cropping systems specialist Ignacio Ciampitti of K-State Research and Extension. And because the corn planting window was rather wide this year, Ignacio, one will see as they travel around the state quite a variation in corn progress.
Yeah, as always, thanks, Eric, for the invitation. Going all the way from northwest, which is what we are seeing is still delayed in terms of development. So most of the crop in that area is some of the most advanced corns. You might see in some tassels, but most of the corn in the northwest section is more, I would say, B10. In some places, we are a little bit even behind, but B10, B14, so 14 leaves. And then from 14 leaves to silking and to flowering, so we probably, depending on the number of leaves, we might have probably 2 weeks in some cases. In some cases, could be only one. So I would say that most of the pollination will be, and flowering will be placed in the next 2 or 3 weeks. So I think that will be concentrated between mid-July all the way to the first week of August. Some of the corn that was on South Central that got pollinated last week.
Which wasn't the best week for pollination.
Yes. And if you look at the temperatures, I think that we have 100 degrees plus, and then we have very narrow variation between day and night temperature. High temperature was speeding up tasseling. So you have pollen that is coming before silks are ready. The second point is most of this pollen is basically only viable for really short time because of the temperature. Even in situations like those silks might be out and receptive to pollen, those silks are 90% of that, 99% of that silk is just water. So with relative humidity high and then high temperatures, they desiccate extremely fast. So we have issues on that also. And then I think that combining with the problem that the plant is basically with high temperature, using most of the sugars accumulated during the day to fix the plant, to repair the plant during the night. But if the night temperatures are too high, the only thing that the plant is doing is just to maintain. So we are seeing some issues on anything that will be getting into pollination last week, anything that was got in pollination. I think that we will be expecting to see potentially some loss of kernels in several sections of the year very randomly because they might be connected to the silks. We might see some more abortion in the upper section. Then we are seeing some other things connected also to the lack of water, and we will discuss in 1 second because someone might think, what?
Oh, how ironic.
Yes, exactly. All the way from being extremely too wet to extremely, in some places, really dry. And I think that there is a connection on that. The connection is I have seen some of the corn that got under stress too quickly. And then in any of the fields that farmers are seeing, the corn is presenting all the leaves that are rolling early in the morning. Those situations with no rain for probably only 4 or 5 days in some places, that tells you something. I mean, and most likely will tell you that we have problems on the roots. And then the roots were not properly developed, so we might probably have very shallow roots. This could be connected most likely to planting conditions, situations that we planted too wet, compacted, those roots never developed. I mean, the soil was saturated. And then we are seeing today the outcomes of those issues. I mean, some really poor development. I mean, the plant is not really sustained to the soil. And then also, I mean, that plant, as soon as you have a very short stress, even a few days, 7 days without rain, immediately will show the symptoms. Because, I mean, most of the roots are focused, concentrated on this upper section of the soil. And even if you have good moisture, most likely those roots are not rich enough, I mean, to take out that moisture. We also are seeing problems connected to that related to nitrogen deficiency. So we are seeing some fields that are showing nitrogen deficiency, not because farmers did not apply in many cases. It's just because roots are not really well developed, so they're not really capturing all the nutrients.
Poor uptake.
Really poor uptake. So one of the things at this point, when we are getting so close to pollination and flowering time, it's one of the moments that we can start thinking about estimating the corn yield potential. We put an article, the last issue of the e-update, and the idea was specifically to highlight main things that farmers will find when they go to the field. One of the main issues that some farmers probably will start seeing more often in the next coming days, it will be this problems of pollination. So whatever got pollination last week, if it didn't got pollinated right, or if there was an asynchrony between the pollen shed and the silks coming out, so they never found each other. So you will start seeing that when the silks are not receptive, or when the silks never receive the pollen, those silks start growing, and they will increase in length and they will remain growing.
So longer silks are indicative of poor pollination.
Yeah, longer silks basically are telling you that at some point the pollen got shed. I mean, the pollen got out, and those silks basically they never really fully receive the pollen. They never germinate that pollen in the silks and never really produce kernels. And then when you open up those ears, you will find basically lack of kernels, because those silks will remain, or will try to remain, green as long as possible, as long as we have good temperatures, as we have right now, as long as we have water. So far, I think that those silks will remain green until, with the expectation of hopefully capturing some pollen at some point. Right. These are some of the points that they could indicate problems in pollination. So these are some of the main issues. Looking at the next 2 weeks or 3 weeks for the corn in Northwest, some of the corn in Southwest. So it's entering a much better environment in terms of temperature. And I think that will be very ideal for an optimal pollination in corn. One of my worries today is basically that I would say in the next 10 days, we are in the peak of water consumption in corn. And then in the next 10 days are really critical. So, and if you look at our forecast on precipitation, or lack of expected precipitation, I should say.
So, could be more stress.
So I think that we will be seeing potentially, more specifically on those plants that they don't have root development, we will be seeing some stress for sure.
Well, it's been a cascade of complications for corn stands in Kansas, to be sure, Ignacio. Might mention that a little later on, as the ears do develop, a producer can go in and follow an ear count formula for estimating corn yield, and that's outlined in that article in the E-Update. Producers soon should be thinking about that once ear set takes place.
Yeah, and we usually try to play on the conservative side. We always say, look at the pollination and flowering time and trying to wait 2 or 3 weeks.
Okay.
Why? Because most likely what will happen to that ear is the pollen got shed, it goes to the silks, germinates. That flower, if it's fertile, I mean, it will produce an embryo, and the embryo will produce a kernel. So until the kernel is set, we need to wait until to make sure that the plant basically will decide what kernels will be continue and what kernels will decide to abort. So, and we usually say wait 2 or 3 weeks because we want to make sure that we are counting kernels that the plant is planning to keep If we look at very simple, briefly steps on how to do these yield estimations, I will recommend it to do in different sections of the field. Find places on the field that are really different. And then if you are working on 30-inch row spacing, go to 17.5 feet. That is what we call 1 on 10,000 of an acre. So you can count the plants, and then you can count how many years. So that is one of the first components, what we call the years per acre. Walk at all the plants and trying to see average year size. Count the number of kernels per year. And when you are counting kernels, we try to keep it simple. We count the number of rows in the year, and then we count basically kernels in a row, and we try to get an average. And then once you have the years per acre and the kernels per year, if you multiply, then you get basically the kernels per acre. And then we use the idea of the kernels per bushels, right? So we go all the way from 75,000 to 80,000 in excellent situations when you are going in kernels per bushel. So 90,000 will be average, and then between 95 and 100,000, 105,000 will be more what we call a poor kernel weight. Once you do the exercise of counting years per acre, kernels per year, you have your kernels per acre. This factor you can play and trust to get at least 3 different situations. You could get the best case scenario, the medium case scenario, and the worst case scenario. And then you know that you have your yields will be probably around those maybe 20, 30 bushels, no more than that.
You have a range.
You have a range at least to start.
Well, producers go through this exercise, and it's outlined fully in this Agronomy e-Update newsletter. We would direct you toward that so you can see precisely how it works. It is quite simple. Ignacio actually has an example you can go through to illustrate how you can come up with the bushels per acre likelihood from that given field. That's at agronomy.ksu.edu. The article dated July the 19th on estimating corn yield potential. Ignacio, thanks for the observations, and we'll have you back soon. Ignacio Ciampitti is a crop production and cropping systems specialist with K-State Research and Extension. You're listening to Agriculture Today, and we'll be back in a few moments with more on the K-State Radio Network.
Did you know every Kansas farmer feeds 128-plus people?
Kansas farmers are hard workers, dependable, authentic, and sensitive.
Not only do farmers put food on your table, but they put clothes on your back and fuel in your car.
For more information about Kansas farmers, visit K-State Research and Extension online or stop by your local extension office. This message has been brought to you by the K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy participants.
You're listening to Agriculture Today, and welcome back. Well, in the news with some frequency now, high-profile court rulings or legal settlements, either one, accompanied by what you'd have to call rather staggering monetary awards to the plaintiffs. And when you see these cases and the results, they do take one aback, but there are some realities to those awards that need to be brought out. And so as we visit once again with a professor of agricultural law and taxation at the Washburn University School of Law, Roger McEowen, we'll get into these. So, Roger, these cases that you'll share to illustrate your point today on this do have agricultural themes to them, but these jury awards or other settlement levels have entered into the millions of dollars.
Yeah, I think the important thing here, Eric, from a farmer's standpoint or from a plaintiff's standpoint, of course, from a farmer's standpoint, I'm talking primarily the Syngenta settlement payments. But, you know, this Roundup litigation that's out there that's irritated a lot of us in ag because you see the enormous jury awards. It brings up a point to me, and of course I deal heavily with tax and ag tax for farmers and ranchers, and that is, well, when you break the numbers down, what's your actual take-home after tax and after federal tax and after state tax? And it's really alarming, the point being that you really don't get a whole lot. in your take-home, so to speak, after the attorney's fees have been paid, after taxes are taken out. And I think that's what I want to take a look at.
Well, let's pick up on a couple of these situations here. One was decided in the month of May, as a matter of fact. It was concerning the use of Roundup and plaintiffs claiming health issues as a result of exposure to glyphosate usage. And the award was not just in the millions, but well beyond.
Yeah. The California jury in that Pilliod case, Alva and Alberta Pilliod were the plaintiffs, awarded $2 billion with a B in punitive damages and $55 million for pain and suffering. Now, when you break that down, you get two different types of damages there. Mm-hmm. You've got punitive damages and you've got damage award for physical suffering, physical sickness, physical illness. Those are treated differently from a tax standpoint. The $55 million in pain and suffering is tax-free because it's to compensate for physical injury and or physical sickness. And we've got a provision in the Internal Revenue Code that says that those types of damages, the Congress, for policy reasons, said we're not going to tax those. So they're not subject to tax. Now, as for the $2 billion in punitive damages, that's a completely different story. Those are fully taxable. And that's you cannot exclude those at all. There's no provision in the code that excludes punitive damages, and that's the lion's share by far of the award here. So once you factor that in, plus the accounts I've seen, is it's estimated that the lawyers in the Roundup case are going to be paid approximately $1 billion in fees and court costs and other costs. So here's how that $2 billion in punitive damage award breaks out. Okay, now I know numbers on radio are difficult, but hang with me here. Yeah. They received $2 billion in punitive damages. They're going to be at the top federal tax rate, which is currently 37%. That's $740 million that comes out off the top. Then they're in California. The top rate for California is 13.3%, so that's another $266 million that comes out for a total tax of $1 billion. $6 million. So your $2 billion's now been cut in half, a little bit more than half. And so you've only got $994 million left. Now remember what I said a moment ago, all the accounts I've read is that the attorneys are going to take about $1 billion. So let's say that, we've got $994 million left after federal and state tax. The attorneys are going to take the balance. So out of the $2 billion, and that is now non-deductible. And that's a change in the tax law created by the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that took effect January 1 of 2018. They're disallowing miscellaneous itemized deductions on the federal return, so that $994 million, let's just round it up to $1 billion, say, that you can't get a tax deduction for that. So that's all out of your pocket, so they're going to have to pay that, meaning the balance remaining for the plaintiffs out of that $2 billion punitive damage award is absolutely zero.
Wow. Shocking, isn't it, when you work those numbers through? And the attorney's fees, pushing $1 billion themselves, those are taxable as well. But the end result for the attorneys in this situation is a bit different, you say.
Yeah, that's right. Now, keep in mind that that amount of $994 million, which I'm counting as real close to $1 billion, has already been taxed. The plaintiffs paid tax on that. Now it's received as income by the attorneys, and it's taxed again. Federal tax rate 37%. That's going to be $367,780,000. California tax rate 13.3%. That's another $132,202,000. So the total tax on that $994 million for the attorneys is $499,982,000, leaving a balance of $544,018,000. Then, because that was derived in their business, they have to pay self-employment tax on that, payroll tax, Medicare tax, so forth and so on. If we assume all those combined would be about 7% after we're done with deductions and so forth that they can claim against that, that's another $38,081,260. So the final balance remaining for the attorneys is $505,936,740. So to summarize all this, remember you got a total jury award of $2 billion, $55 million, $2 billion punitive, $55 million in actual damages. Total taxes paid, federal and state, $1,544,063,260 for an effective tax rate of over 75%.
Wow. Roger, this is a facet of these rulings and these awards that most people don't fully realize. Now, to further illustrate this, you have what could happen with the forthcoming Syngenta payments. To remind, that was a lawsuit brought over the release of certain seed technology into the market, which allegedly caused the U.S. market for corn in China to be hampered. We won't get into the finer details of the case itself, but you've worked up an example of how the tax liabilities would again impact settlements with producers in this instance.
Yeah, and this is fully taxable because it's not paid on account of actual physical damage or physical injury. So that we can't exclude it under Section 104 of the Code. So let's say I've got a Kansas farmer, corn farmer, gets a $10,000 settlement check as a result of participating in the Syngenta class action litigation. So they're all happy. Oh, I've got $10,000. I can plow that back into my farming operation. I can pay bills. Not so fast. You got $10,000 gross. That's fully taxable. And so let's assume that my farmer's in the let's just lower the rate a little bit. Let's say they're in the 24% bracket, and so that's $2,400 that comes out. And let's assume about an 8% tax rate because Kansas is lower than California, which is 13.3. So if we assume 8, and I may be a little high on that, but let's just throw in at 8 for illustration purposes. That's another $800. So total tax is $3,200. Now I'm down to $6,800. And you say, well, I got $6,800. No. You got to pay attorney's fees, and let's put those at 40%. So that's $4,000 more that comes out. So now you're down to $2,800. And since the payment really arose out of your trader business, you got to pay self-employment tax and Medicare tax and payroll tax, all kinds of stuff on that. And I assume 7%, so that's another $700. So the bottom line is, you started with 10, you're going to end up with, in my example, $2,100.
And in fact, that's going to resonate here in Kansas as those payments might be issued here in the relative near future. So what you want producers to understand is the realities of these awards and the potential returns from such action, and be aware that there is a major tax component associated with any such matters.
Yeah, that's right. And particularly with respect to Syngenta, by the time the producer gets the payment, the attorney fees, which they're currently battling over that right now. That's why payments have been delayed until at least February of next year. Those may already have been taken out. Bottom line is, if you're expecting X, you may end up with Y. And we're even having to deal with this in Chapter 12 bankruptcy cases where we're filing schedules of assets and liabilities with the courts right now. I'm familiar with several right now where they have told the court, well, I'm expecting Syngenta payments, and that's going in on their bankruptcy schedules on a projected net amount, not the gross amount of what they've been told that they will recover, because we've got to back out taxes, we have to back out fees. Basically, what you want to think of is you're probably going to recover about 25%. I think most of the Kansas farmers are going to be in that 25%, maybe 30% range on what the gross amount would be after you take out taxes and fees and costs.
Well, thanks for bringing this to our attention. Once more, it's something that most folks probably aren't fully aware of. And Roger, we appreciate your time, and we'll talk with you again in 2 weeks.
Thank you, Eric.
He is Roger McEowen, professor of agricultural law and taxation at the Washburn University School of Law. Follow items like this and others on his blog at washburnlaw.edu/WALTR. And we'll return in a moment with more on this Agriculture Today.
Did you eat today? Thank a farmer. A way to get more involved in agriculture is through 4-H and FFA. Through 4-H and FFA, we have been given multiple opportunities to grow as leaders and learn more about agriculture.
You can learn skills related to jobs, public speaking skills, and you get the opportunity to travel around the country and meet new people.
If you want more information about getting more involved in 4-H and FFA, visit them on their websites at kansasffa.org and kansas4h.org.
This is the K-State Radio Network and Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson here. And next up, a glance at today's agricultural news headlines for you, courtesy in part of DTN. Well, U.S. trade negotiators will reportedly travel to Shanghai, China this Monday for the first round of face-to-face talks since last month's G20 summit in Japan. U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer and Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin will lead the U.S. delegation. Vice Premier Liu He and Commerce Minister Zhang Shang will head up the Chinese side. The face-to-face meeting came after concessions were recently announced by both U.S. and China. The U.S. said it would offer exemptions from import tariffs for 110 Chinese products. Meanwhile, China said companies will soon purchase U.S. agricultural products after being granted exemptions from duties imposed by Beijing. Meantime, the USDA will provide more information on the distribution of trade aid to farmers to compensate for the loss of China markets by the end of the week, according to USDA Secretary. He told this to reporters yesterday after a speech to farm credit executives visiting Washington, D.C. Perdue said that producers who qualify for the Market Facilitation Program by filing crop data reports will get a minimum of $15 per acre. That aid will be distributed in 3 tranches, according to the Secretary. The latest round of MFP payments was initially announced in May after talks between China and the U.S. collapsed. Earlier announcements about this next series of MFP payments is that the program will have a single county rate that will be multiplied by a farm's total planting of commodity crops this year. The total planted acres for a farm cannot exceed 2018 planted acres. Further, producers who were unable to plant a commodity crop and filed a prevent planting claim would still be eligible for a minimal payment if they planted cover crops on that ground. Now, the USDA can establish the aid program without congressional involvement because it has authority to spend $30 billion per year to help producers. However, Senate Agriculture Committee Ranking Member Debbie Stabenow noted at a hearing this summer that the USDA has already distributed so much in farm subsidies and trade aid that the department has less than $7 billion remaining in CCC budget authority for the fiscal year that ends on September the 30th. Perdue also said the USDA could begin distributing $3 billion in a separate disaster aid program next month. The disaster aid was passed back in June as part of the $19 billion supplemental disaster assistance to help Midwestern producers who experienced flooding this year and for Southern farmers who experienced hurricanes and Western forest owners who experienced fires last year. Now, farm lenders got a brief overview yesterday of the state of the farm economy from Secretary Perdue, and he said that the farm financial situation is not a rosy picture, as he put it. More from the USDA's Gary Crawford.
The best sustainability prescription for agriculture is profitability, and that's what we need here in agriculture.
But Agriculture Secretary Sonny Perdue told a meeting of ag lenders in Washington Tuesday profits are becoming more elusive.
It's not a very rosy picture right now.
Farm income this year expected to be 50% below the peak of 2013.
And 23% below the historical average over the last 2 decades. So not a good picture.
In the last couple of years, record crop yields have helped farmers make up for low commodity prices, but with bad early growing season weather this year,
it looks very questionable whether much of our agriculture this year will benefit from those record-setting yields that we've seen. And that makes our job, your job, even tougher as we help get our producers through that.
Loan demand is up, access to working capital down, farm bankruptcies rising, but Perdue says the bankruptcy rate's still very low. Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Washington.
Also on the farm policy front, the Trump administration announced it will release a rule that the USDA estimates will take Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program or food stamp benefits away from more than 3 million people, saving the government $2.5 billion per year. Secretary Perdue and the Agriculture Deputy Undersecretary for Food, Nutrition, and Consumer Services, Brandon Lips, told reporters the USDA would publish a proposed rule to end what they call the broad-based categorical eligibility loophole that has allowed people to be qualified qualified for SNAP benefits without going through what Lips calls the robust eligibility determination for up to 2 years while receiving benefits. The proposed rule was published yesterday, and a 60-day public comment period begins today. Secretary Perdue said it is USDA's responsibility to make sure that those who need food get it, but said that states have taken advantage of a rule that allowed the states to qualify people easily. The secretary cited the case of a Minnesota millionaire who managed to qualify for SNAP benefits using broad-based categorical eligibility as an example of why the regulation should be changed. About 36 million people got SNAP benefits in April, down from about 45 million at the height of the post-2008 Great Recession. This rule would remove about 3 million people, or 8% of current beneficiaries, from the SNAP rolls, according to the USDA. Here in Kansas, state animal health officials are recommending horse and other livestock owners be on the lookout for symptoms of a contagious disease. Todd Domer tells us here, although Kansas has reported no cases thus far, there are ongoing outbreaks in nearby states that do present a risk.
The Kansas Department of Agriculture Division of Animal Health is encouraging livestock owners to be aware and take precautions to minimize the potential of animals contracting the vesicular stomatitis virus. Officials said particular attention should be given to animals commingled at competitions and similar events. Multiple cases have been confirmed in Texas, Colorado, and New Mexico. There have been no cases of the virus reported in Kansas. Vesicular stomatitis primarily affects horses, but cattle, sheep, goats, swine, llamas, and alpacas also are susceptible. Symptoms are fever and the formation of blister-like lesions on the mouth, nostrils, ears, hooves, and teats. Infected animals may refuse to eat and drink. There are no USDA-approved vaccines for the virus. The primary method of transmission is biting insects like black flies, sand flies, and midges. It also can be spread by nose-to-nose contact between animals. Vesicular stomatitis typically runs its course in 5 to 7 days. It can take an additional week for infected animals to recover. The Kansas Division of Animal Health has implemented enhanced import requirements from the affected regions to prevent the spread into Kansas. Any person who suspects animals may have the virus should contact their local veterinarian or state animal health officials, as vesicular stomatitis is considered a reportable disease in Kansas. I'm Todd Domer.
And that's a look at today's agricultural news page. We'll return shortly on Agriculture Today.
Did you know every Kansas farmer feeds 128 plus people?
Kansas farmers are hard workers, dependable, authentic, and sensitive.
Not only do farmers put food on your table, but they put clothes on your back and fuel in your car.
For more information about Kansas farmers, visit K-State Research and Extension online or stop by your local Extension office. This message has been brought to you by the K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy participants.
This is Agriculture Today. Stop, look, and listen.
Those were the moments that the abnormality of the normal struck me.
That's Gus Vanderhoeven of Kansas State University with comment on life in rural Kansas.
The last few weeks, the TV programs and the articles in the newspapers and many magazines have reminisced about the Apollo 11 moon mission 50 years ago. It was an amazing feat. I have again watched in awe the successful landing, the first step with an imprint on the moon dust, and most important, their successful return to Earth. On my computer, Google showed the scene on the moon and played the rocket scene, where the different stages are falling off. I watched it a couple of times, just drawings, but very interesting to see the small part which reaches the moon, the capsule which comes back. As the people spoke of the successful event, we went to the moon and returned. I have thought about what the 3 astronauts said after returning to Earth, that they would never go back to space. If you think about that, once is enough. They were very special people. I admire them for the courage and trust they had in all the people who stood behind them and made this moon mission a success. They expressed their thanks to all. Watching a TV program, one of several each time, I was amazed with the number of people sitting behind their computer desk, watching, doing things, communicating. Then the very normal phone conversation of one of the astronauts with his daughter. "How was school today?" And answering with, "I still got to do my math." Those were the moments that the abnormality of the normal struck me. Maybe I should reverse that and say the normality of the abnormal. Another thing that struck me was looking and seeing the stars beyond the moon, way, way beyond. I pulled a book off my shelves, Music of the Spheres by Guy Murphy, and once more glanced through it. I should sit down and read it. It was published in 1961. That is a long time ago, and they know so much more today. But I love the title, Music of the Spheres. And it is with that feeling that I can look up into the starry night. The older I get, the more in awe I feel, and insignificant, and yet a full person. I can be happy with that. I see the Big Dipper, and when living down under, I looked at the Southern Cross. The Australian night sky is very beautiful. In Kansas, away from the cities, we too have beautiful starry nights. The few times I've slept on the farm on top of the hills with the dog next to me, I would lay on my back and look into the night sky, and I would be in awe what my eyes saw and my brain tried to grasp. Those are the moments you wished you knew more. Yes, we all know stories of the North Star and its significance, the people it guided on the seas and when traveling on land. I think about those escaping from slavery following the North Star, a long and dangerous trek. These last weeks we have had a full moon, and being the 50th anniversary of that first moonshot, I looked at the moon with different eyes. I remember talking with people who do not believe it really happened, who thought it was all a hoax. Some of the people would argue with me that the earth was not round. No, the earth was flat. Their argument was, have you ever seen a ball with 4 corners? It was the Bible they quoted, with the 4 angels each at a corner of the earth. I know you can't win them all. Talking about winning, it is said that the planned Symphony of the Flint Hills did not happen this year. The rain and more rain caused it to be cancelled. That must have been a very tough decision to make. But reading up on it, I think this year's theme at Astra was a brilliant idea for a celebration on the Flint Hills' uniqueness. Where the grassy hills would be underfoot, the starry night would create the expansive dome to study and learn about overhead. Sad as it was that this year's event was cancelled, I hope that next year they will use many parts of this year's theme and program with the emphasis on the night sky and the stars. We're lucky in Kansas. Of course, we have our big cities with all the lights which make the night sky fade out. However, many of us live in the country, and if our farm yard lights work on a switch and not automated by a light cell, we can control if the yard light is on or off. I know it is a convenience that when the sun goes down, the yard light comes on. It's 24-hour light. And looking up at the stars does not make money. and after driving the combine for days on end, who cares? Yet, when you finally call it a day and the drum of the combine has stopped turning and all is quiet, no noise, and you've switched off the combine lights, just look up. Hold on to the combine leather railing. You might get dizzy. Just look up. Up. There are the stars. Some are familiar. Your father, grandfather looked at them when they brought in the horses slowly plodding tired, but speeding up as they got closer to home. Those are the same stars, the same moon. Awesome. And we stepped on the moon.
Gus Vander Hoeven of Kansas State University with his weekly commentary on life in rural Kansas. He's along with us each Wednesday right here. And our time is away for today. Thanks to you for listening in. We'll be right back here tomorrow. Hope you will as well. Meantime, Eric Atkinson bidding you a good day for Agriculture Today. This is the K-State Radio Network.